Is the Jacksonville housing market going to crash in 2025? And if so, how much could home prices drop? In this video, I'm going to give you the data on the Jacksonville, Florida housing market, as well as surrounding areas like St. Johns County and St. Augustine, so you as a buyer or an investor can have a better sense of where the market is heading. Let's start by looking at some basic data. The typical home value in the Jacksonville metro area is $348,000. You can see that this skyrocketed during the pandemic up to $353,000, has now gone down slightly 2 years in a row. In particular, values are now dropping in Duval County, Clay County, and St. Johns County, where they're down 1.9% year over year. And so we are firmly in a declining housing market in and around Jacksonville. The values are dropping, and I believe they're likely going to continue to drop in 2025 due to an excess buildup of supply and inventory on the market. For instance, there's now almost 8,500 homes for sale in the Jacksonville metro, according to data available on Reventure app. You can see that this is the highest level of supply and inventory that we've seen in the last 8 to 9 years. At the same time, sellers are now cutting prices in Jacksonville at the highest rate in 8 to 9 years, with a price cut rate of 34% of all listings in February 2025. And so if you're a buyer or an investor, or a realtor or a seller trying to understand the future direction of prices in Jacksonville, those two data points are going to do a lot to help you. And the fact that inventory is now much higher and price cuts are now much higher is firmly telling you there's downward pressure in the market and prices are likely to drop more into the future. However, what I think is problematic for a lot of you guys out there as buyers is that you're seeing the prices drop a little bit and you're saying to yourself, it's still way too expensive. The prices are still too expensive for a lot of buyers to afford, particularly local buyers in Florida. And as a result, the demand levels in the market are really, really low. And it's this low demand that's also another indication that prices are going to drop more in the future. As you can see here, data from Redfin is showing that the weekly home sales in Duval County are down to all the way to 221 a week. That was as of mid-February 2025. That was one of the lowest demand levels we've seen in the last 9 years. So literally, not only do we have sky-high supply in Jacksonville and Duval County, we have very low demand, meaning that we now have the highest months of supply on the market in Duval County in the last decade, actually going back to the last housing crash. And what's scary is that a lot of places in Florida are now flashing big red warning indicators are indicative of a crash. And I know a lot of you out there, you're tired of hearing of this crash. A lot of people have been talking about a crash for the last 3 or 4 years. But in reality, almost all of the metrics in the market are pointing to there being a big downturn. And now's the time, if you're a buyer, to start getting excited, because you're going to see more and more discounts on the market as the year goes on. And if you are someone who wants to buy more imminently, the way that you can use this data to make a better decision is by understanding that in markets where prices are dropping and are going to drop more in the future, you can make lowball offers to sellers in those markets, and you're going to have a higher likelihood of those lowball offers being accepted. And with that, let's take a look at some of the listings on the market in the Jacksonville, Florida metro right now, everyone, and see, how much houses are costing. We talked about the typical value being $384,000, but there's a lot of variation above and below that. And one area actually where prices are a bit higher is a place called San Marco to the south side of Jacksonville. This is a nice community near the water where a 4-bed, 3-bath home is currently listed for around $750,000. Now you can see the owner of this house bought it in 2009 for $450,000. So they're marking it up by 66% over the last 16 years, which is around 4% appreciation per year. Actually isn't that crazy on a per year basis. However, you can see Zillow thought this house was worth $650 and the seller listed for $750, and they only have 55 saves on 1,200 views, so it shows that people aren't as interested in this house. Now, an area of Jacksonville that's a bit cheaper is the west side of Jacksonville, and the west side of Jacksonville is where a lot of investors have bought up homes. You can see houses listed for like $150,000 all over the place here, and these are small houses. These are like 2-bed, 2-bath, 920 square feet. $139,000. I don't know, folks. Would you pay $139,000 for this house? They originally listed at $1,600, have cut to $140, and you can see it was a rental not too long ago. Now, another area in the Jacksonville metro that a lot of you are looking at is to the south in St. Johns County, particularly St. Augustine. This is a place that a lot of people are looking to buy homes. It's a pretty nice retirement area, pretty historic downtown area as well if you've ever visited. Some of these houses near downtown St. Augustine are going for like 1.1 million. However, take a look at this one, everyone. It's a 3-bed, 3-bath. This might be the thinnest house I've ever seen on the west side of St. Augustine. 1,400 square feet, 322 grand. A new build built in 2024 that they have not sold yet. Now, this whole area in Northeast Florida is interesting because it's kind of different from the rest of Florida when you talk about Jacksonville and St. Augustine. Now, Jacksonville and St. Augustine is a bit different from the rest of Florida, this Northeast area. In particular, the climate is a bit cooler. It doesn't get quite as hot during the summer up in Northeast Florida. And parts of Northeast Florida feel more like the South in America than being in Florida. You almost feel like you're in a part of Georgia, maybe than a part of Florida. You're very close to the Georgia border. So there's a bit of a difference in culture. There isn't much of a local economy in Northeast Florida, so you're not going to have huge levels of like Fortune 500 job growth. You're not going to have huge levels of economic growth. It's mainly going to be retirement people moving in. It's mainly going to be just the local population growing through organic growth. Now you can see that the Jacksonville Metro actually grew by 11.6% in population over the last 5 years, actually from 2018 to 2023. That was a pretty high level of population growth. If we were to look at metros with at least 500,000 people, Jacksonville would have been 8th best in terms of population growth in America over the last 5 years. Actually really strong population growth overall. But as you could see, that population growth is very skewed. St. Johns County grew by 26% over the last 5 years. So by far, St. Johns County was like the big driver of that growth. Also, Nassau County to the north grew 18%, whereas Duval and Clay County only grew by 8%. You can also see Flagler County down in Palm Coast grew by 17%. So if you want to go to an area that's high growth, particularly if you're an investor in Florida, you got to look at this population growth data from Reventure app at the county level as well as the zip code level. Because you can see there's huge differences just at different neighborhood levels in population growth. We have these areas near downtown Jacksonville that are barely growing or losing people, and then these areas that are growing by 40%. Now, one thing I'll say that worries me about Jacksonville's housing market is the concentration of investors in the market, because a lot of investors love Jacksonville. During the pandemic, particularly the big Wall Street investors, they gobbled up homes all over the Jacksonville metro. Many of them are still buying homes today. However, they're buying homes now at a much slower pace than they were 2 to 3 years ago. And some investors are now even selling their houses in Jacksonville. And that's creating instability in the market that's leading to that higher inventory figure I showed you before and leading to the lower home sale figure, which is leading to home price decline. So the investors in Jacksonville, they went from causing the market to go up by more to now causing the market to go down. So I want you to look at this, everyone. This is data from Redfin on the investor purchases in the Jacksonville, Florida metro. Take a look at this. During the pandemic, the investor purchases doubled all the way to 3,300 a quarter in the middle of 2022. But since then, the investor purchases have collapsed by 75%, now down to the lowest level since around 2017. You can see there was a similar run-up in investor purchases in 05-06 and a similar collapse which preceded the housing crash back then. So just a thing to understand about Jacksonville is this kind of volatility related to the investor activity and the fact that the investors are now out on this market, which is a signal that it could drop by more in the future. And so 2 interesting questions to ask if you're a buyer, investor, or seller in Jacksonville's market in 2025 is, are home prices going to drop? And how much are they going to drop by? And I'm going to answer those 2 questions with data from Reventure app for you guys right now. Reventure app is the program I've been using all throughout this video. I'm going to explain at the end how you can actually get access to this data for yourself as a buyer investor in Jacksonville so you can make a more informed decision. But let's talk about are prices in Jacksonville going to drop this year? Answer that question. Well, the Reventure app home price forecast score for Jacksonville is a 36 out of 100, which is below average. This is indicating that prices are going to drop in Jacksonville this year. You could see our price forecast a year ago was a 46, which indicated the start of the downturn. Now it's gone down to a 36, which indicates that this downturn is going to accelerate in Jacksonville this year. And the way that we come up with this price forecast is by looking at the recent appreciation trends, the DOM, the inventory, and the price cuts. And it's all saying downward price pressure in Jacksonville that will get worse as the year goes on, which will be good for you as a buyer. However, I don't think we're going to see a 30% crash this year in Jacksonville. Home prices, housing downturns don't typically happen that quickly. Values are already down a couple percent from peak. I think they could go down another 5 to 7% this year in Jacksonville, with the market today being about 20% overvalued compared to long-term norms. The overvaluation rate on Reventure app. So, maybe prices in the end will go down 20% during this downturn. You can see values peaked in overvaluation in 2023. They've become a little bit more fairly valued, but we're still way above this long-term trend line. In fact, values in Jacksonville were very undervalued for much of the last decade before the pandemic. And then the pandemic hit and they became overvalued again. So I think it's very reasonable to think both in the short term and intermediate term prices are going to drop in Jacksonville. Maybe we need to see a 20% correction before it makes sense to buy more broadly. However, things vary a lot by city and zip code. So make sure to go to www.reventure.app and look up that overvaluation rate and that home price forecast for your zip code. This is going to let you know the risk factors of how much prices could decline or go up in the future. This data is available under a premium plan at $39 a month or $399 a year. If you're someone who knows you're going to be tracking this data, that annual plan comes with a 15% monthly discount to the monthly rate. So head to www.reventure.app right now and check out the data in Jacksonville and the rest of Florida for yourself.